HOA story time, Karen and the supposedly unauthorized construction by koalas and penguins. Miraculously, I found a home in an HOA that isn't horrible. Unfortunately, every HOA requires at least one Karen. Last year, I joined the HOA board for my neighborhood of townhomes. I wanted to finally have a say in what was happening in my community. In this short time, I have learned that very few people bother reading anything about their HOA before buying a home. Because of this, I see endless issues where people don't know what rules they've agreed to live by. It now surprises me when somebody acts responsibly and contacts the HOA with an appropriate request. 2 months ago, a responsible homeowner asked for approval to add a small patio to the grass in front of his home. This is a common landscaping feature in our neighborhood. Our rules state that he is welcome to add the patio as long as it is identical to the others in the community. So, of course, we approve the request. Now enters our neighborhood Karen. Karen lives next to this responsible homeowner, and on Monday, the construction began to install the patio. Karen started a verbal altercation with the homeowner's contractor. She demanded to see written approval and construction designs for everything. Karen was told to mind her own business. As a Karen, she then felt it was her responsibility to contact our HOA management company's emergency line. She berated the office staff for never calling or emailing her to ask permission to do the construction or inform her that it was approved. She felt that the space was close enough to her home that she had just as much right to it as her neighbor. She also kept repeating that there were many other HOA violations without giving any details. Karen was transferred to the property manager's mobile phone number to leave a message. Apparently, Karen said something concerning enough in the voicemail that I received an urgent call from the property manager. She begged me to walk over to the responsible neighbor's house, take a few pictures, and see if there was anything unusual about the construction work. She was worried that the patio may look different than the others in the neighborhood. So I packed my toddler in her stroller and I took a walk down there. Ladies and gentlemen, everything was perfectly normal. There were no problems. The construction was not occurring anywhere near Karen's property. I was baffled as to why Karen would feel that she has some claim to the area that's on the opposite side of the neighbor's house from her. A few hours ago, I learned that Karen isn't even the homeowner of the property next to the responsible neighbor. She is the sister of the real homeowner. I learned this because the real homeowner went to our online resident portal to send the HOA a message. She seems to be embarrassed by her sister's behavior and stated that she actually read her homeowner documents and feels that the HOA has done a great job of handling this situation. I am praying that this is the end of this week's drama. What do you think about a no trespassing or restraining order against Karen? Neighbor and HOA harassment posted by Sean B for Life. My coworker's neighbor behind him has been reporting him to their HOA for months now, getting them fined for literally nothing. The latest issue was having a fire pit on the back porch. The bylaw mentions you can't have an open fire or have fire pits in use, but grills are allowed. But the issue here is that the fire pit is not in use. Also, the picture presented to show the fireplace on the back porch comes from that neighbor's security camera that is directly pointed at his house. The entire view of the camera is all of only his property and nothing else. The houses are separated by a drivable alleyway too. This neighbor spies on him regularly. He sees him looking out at them all the time, day and night. And also, he trespasses on people's property to find reasons to report them. I told him to fight it because he's spying, privacy breaching, and the bylaw doesn't say that you can't own one or have one out, and harassment. Any other advice? A question and update from OP. Has he got children and have them out playing in the rear yard when he uses a grill? Then lay a charge of the neighbor creating inappropriate videos. OP replies, my coworker is in college renting the house with 7 other people. They all stay inside mostly and are quiet from the info that I'm given. This entire neighborhood is right next to their college. The position of the camera gathered from the photo evidence of breaking the bylaw has direct view of the back door, so every time it opens, you can see inside. The entirety of the camera view and from all shows only the upper half of my coworker's backyard, along with his entire house. It does not show the alley street in between their houses or the owner of the camera's backyard. Are these normal houses in a suburb? Or are the HOAs gated communities with townhouses or something? Someone asked, and OP replied, it's a 3-street subdivision in a larger neighborhood. It's not gated. Wow, they seem incredibly intrusive for just a small house in a suburb. I get condos with shared common property needing them. They're seen as the downside of owning a condo and apartment here. Maybe because housing estates in the US have to maintain stuff that is maintained by the local council in other countries. The final update. So far now, he has been charged with the following: having a fire pit in view on the back porch. The bylaw states it can't be lit that close to the house, and we're fined for it being lit, which it wasn't, and without evidence. Having a hammock drilled into the tree in their backyard, but it was one of those wraparound tension ones. This had something to do about the destruction of the landscape. Continuous complaints about different cars parked in the driveway. I don't know how this is even a thing, but when you have 7 college students renting a house, it should be expected. Continuous noise complaints. Their neighbors on both sides throw parties all the time, so the HOA groups them all together. And the most recent was a fine for having the grill on the front porch. It was never on the front porch. I helped them move in and I took it straight to the back porch. It's too big and too heavy to just move to their tiny front porch. All of this is without any proof, and most of these fines are from bylaws that don't exist or what they wish they wrote in but didn't. As in, they have no grounds for these fines. All of them have been $50 to $100, which they have refused to pay and are usually dropped. The latest one with the grill was $750. Pretty steep in my eyes for an HOA fine. They even mentioned in their emails about the fire pit that the grill is the only thing allowed on the back porch and it never left the back porch. It is clear they're being targets by the HOA and their rear neighbor. Their landlord at this point is tired of the complaints and wants them all out. This feels like a group thing, like they're all in on it. I told him to take legal action. Is there any legal action to take? Any ground to stand on? I know HOAs can pretty much do what they want sometimes. Karen gets arrested because I wasn't being a good cashier, posted by Sim Mini. So I used to work as a cashier in a supermarket. This story took place on my 4th day of work there, and my 2nd day working at a cash register on my own without a supervisor sitting next to me, like teaching me the ropes. Yes, I had 2 days of training. I'm sure most of you will figure out in which country I live from the following explanation. It will become relevant later. Supermarkets in my country are a zoo on a regular day. However, Thursdays and Fridays are absolute mayhem at the store and are a special kind of heck. Fridays, the store closes 2 hours before sundown, as do most stores in this country. So during the winter, this means at around 1400 and in summer, closer to 1630. People get crazy on Fridays, trying to get all their shopping done and get home in time to cook dinner. If you can avoid coming to the store on Friday, please do so at all costs. I always told people after this day. The reason Thursdays are heck is because we get all the customers who don't want to come in on Friday. Now, this was early evening on a Thursday, at a time when the store is absolutely jam-packed. We had 10 checkout lines open, and every line had at least 6 or 7 people in line. Basically, if you're stuck with the slow cashier, there is nowhere else to go unless you have 10 items or less. Everything is going well until I get a customer with 2 shopping carts full of items, mostly non-perishable items, and these are the large carts you find around big stores in the US like Walmart. I found out later he buys this for a community center in his neighborhood and he fills up their pantry twice a year. Nice guy. He greeted me very politely and then said the most dreaded words I could have ever heard that night. "This will be a delivery." Just a quick break from the story to explain why this was so dreaded, especially on a day like today. When we get a delivery, the cashier would call a helper from the store to help bag the groceries. Usually, people do their own bagging. The bags would then be placed in plastic containers, and then containers would be placed on top of each other and taken to the back fridge until delivery. A regular delivery is usually between 3 to 5 crates. Each crate has a number, which then I have to input all of them into the computer, along with correct delivery address and phone numbers, and print out with the receipt and place copies in the crates. Even for a small delivery, this always takes extra time. Back to the story. This guy has 2 full carts and wants a delivery. I say, sure, no problem. And then I turn to everyone else in line and let them know that this is a delivery and it will take just a bit longer than usual, and apologize for any delay this may cause. We always do this, so customers will be aware of the delay and can move to another cash register if they're in a hurry. This is when the whole line groaned simultaneously. I don't blame them. There was nowhere else to go. I could see every one of them craning their necks to check out other lines, and they all decided to stay. So I start scanning as fast as I can. I'm pretty good with numbers, so even though it's my 4th day, I remember many of the codes and things are moving rather quickly. I get to a point where the bagger can't keep up with all the items, and the area to the left of me, where I place all the scanned items, is just a mountain of cans and bags of chips and whatnot. I can't even scan another item because they're all falling back onto my scale. At this point, I stop and ask if he wants help bagging. The customer and the bagger are both appreciative, and I help bag groceries for a few minutes. Just enough to clear some space so I can continue scanning items. This happens every few minutes. It gets full, I stop to help, clear some space, and keep going. This is where the Karen comes into play. She is maybe early 40s, long brown hair, and looks nothing like a Karen, except for the way she was standing with one hand on a hip that extended so far to the side that I wasn't sure how she's still standing. She's still in my line, about 5 or 6 people in front of her still, and this is the conversation that follows. Karen says, "Hello, what are you doing?" I don't answer because I didn't think she was talking to me. I just keep scanning. "Excuse me, what kind of cashier are you? Why aren't you doing your job? Stop being lazy and do your job," she screams at the top of her lungs. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just trying to." "That's not your job. You are a cashier. Do your job. Do your job." I realize now, after reading so many Reddit stories, that this would have been a perfect chance for some malicious compliance. I'm sure some of you hope that I did just what Karen wanted. Too bad I didn't know about it then, or that it was only my 4th day on the job. That's not what happened, although I dream sometimes that I did just that. You know, like sit back and sip my coffee until the space cleared for more scanned items. You know, be a cashier. Next time. I said, "I'm just helping to move things along faster. If this is a problem, or if you're in a hurry, feel free to move to another line. I'm sure another cashier will be more than happy to serve you." I may sound like I'm the a-hole with this line, but I said it really nicely, not sarcastic at all. Obviously, that didn't help. Karen, not listening anyway, and having none of it, shouts, "Just do your dang job. You are a cashier. What is wrong with you? Are you stupid? You should be fired." I stop listening at this point, and I don't answer as I'm still helping to bag and scan as fast as possible, knowing it's not going to help anyway. However, I see one of my managers, let's call him Joe, walk up to Karen. Joe is great, by the way, always helping the workers. Joe says, "What seems to be the problem?" Karen, still yelling, shouts, "Your cashier is awful. She is lazy and she is not doing her job. You should fire her. Tell her to do her job. She is not doing her job." She repeated that like a few times like a broken record. Joe looks over at me for a second, understands exactly what is happening, turns to Karen and says, "Can't you see she's just trying to help? She's trying to make this go much faster." Now Karen starts screaming words, I'm assuming, but I couldn't really make them out. She was practically foaming at the mouth. Joe tries to calm her down by explaining, or trying to, how me bagging items is actually helping, and this makes Karen even more irate, if you can believe it. Spit flying from her mouth, arms flailing, screaming like a banshee. Suddenly, I notice an older woman, a nice old lady. She must have been around 80 years old, trying to get Karen's attention by tapping her on the shoulder. It takes a few tries, but she finally gets her attention and spins her around by her shoulder. Nice old lady says, "Hey, Karen." "Karen? Excuse me? Karen!" "What?" "Your daughter is crying." This is when the entire store seemed to have stopped talking all at once, like someone pressed mute and turned off the volume. The sea of people in front of me parts a bit, and we all look down and see a little girl who couldn't have been older than 4, clutching her mother's thighs, bawling her eyes out, snot coming out of everywhere, hyperventilating. This girl was terrified, and I can't blame her. Seeing her mother going off like that must have been terrifying, and she has no idea what's happening. She's in a huge store where she knows no one, and she's practically invisible. This silence lasted an entire 2 seconds, because that's when Karen started yelling at Joe. "Look what you did, and you and your stupid lazy cashier, you made my daughter cry," and a bunch of other just crazy sounds that were perhaps supposed to be words. Things happened in slow motion for the next few seconds. She starts to swing towards Joe. Now, Joe's not a big guy, but he is bigger than Karen, that's for sure, and he's not easily intimidated. Not his first Karen. She would have decked him right in the face if the nice old lady hadn't grabbed her in a bear hug to stop her. Yes, she did. I had to pick up my jaw off of the floor. At that point, other customers got involved, trying to peel off the nice old lady from Karen and stop Karen from trying to kill Joe, and from Joe trying to kill Karen because he was just fuming by then. At this point, I saw mall security storm the castle. Our store was inside of a mall, and the sea of people just surrounded Karen, and I couldn't really see much of anything anymore. Kind of like football players when there's a fumble and they all jump on the ball. By the sound of yelling getting farther and farther away, I figured Karen was being either led to the back office or to the mall security office or mall jail. This entire time that this is happening, I'm still bagging and scanning items, and I'm about halfway through this customer's purchase. I finish up with him with no more problems. He was very nice and thanked me profusely for helping with the bags, even though technically it wasn't part of my job. He said that I was the fastest and nicest cashier he ever had the pleasure of meeting. I was just happy to help. No one else in my line complained. I actually got compliments from people about keeping my composure. Apparently, many cashiers in my country think it's okay to yell at the customers and just be plain nasty. I worked in customer service for many years prior, and I have never yelled at a customer, even if they deserved it. Once the rush died down a bit, I went for a break. I met another employee in the back room, and I started to tell him of what just happened when he cut me off. She was yelling at you. I heard that. Well, everyone heard that, but I had no idea what in the world was happening. He told me that police were called and Karen was escorted out of the store and the mall in handcuffs. I filled him in on everything, and we spent the next 30 minutes laughing. I don't know what happened with the child. I'm assuming they called another family member to pick her up. I also don't know what happened with Karen after that, since I ended up working there for another year, and I never saw her again. Hopefully, she learned to do her grocery shopping on Tuesday or Wednesday, or was probably in prison or house arrest. This was the first Karen that I had the displeasure of meeting while working at that store, but it definitely was not the last. Entitled Karen Wants to Use My Wheelchair at an Antique Store, posted by Artistic Pain 2355. The cast is me, Nels, an old man, and then Harriet, who is Karen. My husband and I rent a display space in an antique and consignment store for our collective side hustles. I quilt and crochet, and my husband sells customized die-cast cars and diorama supplies. Every few weeks, we go in and restock our space. This store is very large and can be a bit of a maze, and the store has designated rest stops throughout the aisles. One is across from our space. The store does not provide mobility aids for customers, so it's a bring your own policy if you need a walker or a wheelchair. I'm a wheelchair user as I'm paralyzed from an L2 spinal cord injury. My husband and I were at the store restocking the space. My husband had just left to take one of our totes out to our van, leaving me in our space sorting through the tote of the baby sets that I make. When I hear someone huffing behind me, I didn't really pay too much attention to it, thinking that someone might have been taking a break at the rest stop. I was just finishing laying out my sets on the table in our space when the person at the rest stop decided to talk to me. "Do you know if the store has wheelchairs for people to use?" I look up from my task and see an elderly couple across from our space. The old man is standing next to the bench, looking kind of annoyed, while the woman has flopped on the bench in an "I can't take another step" kind of way. I honestly was concerned that she might have been having a medical issue as she was just rather plump. "Are you okay?" I ask, about to tell her or her partner to use the phone above the bench to reach the staff desk for help. "This store is too freaking big," Harriet exclaims. "I can't walk anymore." I say, "The store has a chair for medevac use. One of the employees could bring it to you if you need help leaving." "But we're not done shopping." "I don't think they have wheelchairs to borrow. They've had issues with rowdy kids riding mobility scooters, so they don't provide them. But if you use the phone above you, you can ask a staff member. Just dial 1 and it'll connect you to the staff desk." There's a sign next to the phone that said this. Harriet seems to be thinking about her options, so I go about my work. Nels wanders down the aisle, possibly looking for an escape route. Harriet shouts, "What about the wheelchair you're sitting in?" "This is my personal wheelchair. It doesn't belong to the store." "Can I borrow it?" "What? Surely she's not asking to take my chair to go shopping." "I want to use the wheelchair. You're young enough that you could just stand to walk for a bit. I'll bring it back." "Ma'am, I cannot stand at all. I've been a paraplegic since I was 12. This wheelchair is not store issued. It's my personal property that cost a lot of money. If you call the staff, maybe they can let you use the medical chair, or maybe they know of someone in their space that has one that you can buy. But I will not give you my chair and I cannot help you." At this point, I've rolled out of our space. I decided to head towards the vendor door and just leave. Rumor has it, Harriet is still sitting on the bench waiting for someone to give her a wheelchair. Neighbor dropped her $50 on the ground in the parking lot, accused me of stealing it. The police are involved. With an update in the comments posted by Elizabeth Honey. Neighbor is a female in her 30s and accused me, 30 female, of stealing her dropped money in a parking lot where we park our cars. I pulled up to park after getting coffee this morning and she's outside in her car. She asked me if I've seen her $50 and I say, "No, I haven't, but if I found it, I'll let you know." So I go inside and give my coffee to the boyfriend, and then I took my dog out. While I was taking my dog out, she was banging on my door, and when boyfriend answered, she was saying that I stole her money and kept accusing me of stealing her money when he said that I didn't steal her money, and if I found it on the ground, I would have told him. She continued accusing me and was clearly upset. She then asked, "Where did I get the money for the coffee then?" Like, what? She thinks I don't have money to buy coffee in the morning. Just so odd all around, and honestly a crazy thing to ask. Boyfriend called her a B and she called me a crackhead. Boyfriend went to apologize for calling her a B and just wanted to squash it and say that I wouldn't take anybody's money. She then slammed the door on his face and said that she was calling the police. The police came and basically asked what's going on and if I took her money. I told him no, up and down, that I didn't, and they said, "Okay, we're going to check the cameras." I replied, "Okay, great, just please check the cameras." They kept using the word, "if I stole her money," and I just broke down and started crying because I felt like I was being accused for something that I didn't do because he used the word "if" at least 4 times. Finally, boyfriend says, "Listen, she said that she didn't do it. You don't need to keep saying 'if,' and I said, 'Please go check the tapes.'" So they did, and then they obviously told her. Then her husband comes home from work and finds me on my porch, and again comes right up to my home and asks about the altercation that happened with his wife. I said that she accused me of stealing, and he immediately wanted to talk to boyfriend and was very angry. I said that the cops were already called. I did not take her money. You guys can watch the cameras. This is over. Please stop harassing me. And at this point, I'm getting extremely upset and emotional. And he said, no, I'm the police now. Whatever that's supposed to mean. I filed a harassment thing with my apartment complex because of this so that I could document some paper trail. My boyfriend's at work and I don't know what's going to happen when he gets home. But these people are crazy. I'm assuming that he's angry that boyfriend called her a B, but she was being one by the way that she was acting, and he even apologized after. I am just upset, being accused of something that I didn't do and would never do. When she told me that she lost it, I felt bad. She didn't accuse me then when she asked me, so I just really don't get it. This whole thing sucks. I needed to vent. What would you guys do now? And by the way, I live in an apartment complex. They live in the second floor and we're the bottom floor. I'm nice to everybody. They blast music all day and night from their cars and porches, and I never say a word or have ever complained. Somebody makes a legal suggestion to OP, and OP replies with an update. Commenter says, you have proof. Management has proof. Have the police check with the management for that proof. Ignore these people. If they continue to harass you, call the police on them, and then tell them you're being harassed and you do not feel safe. Hugs and support your way. Sorry you had a bad day. OP updates with, the police did check the cameras and they told me that they would tell her that I called them for an update, but the sheriff never called me back. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Her husband wants to talk to boyfriend and I just really don't want it to turn sour. I have no idea what he is going to say to him or what. But he just seemed to want to talk to him like he was ticked, and I don't know what these people are capable of. I filed a harassment report and I wrote down what happened, and I said that I felt harassed at the end. I mean, these people are knocking on my door, yelling at me. Basically, it's insane, and calling the cops on me. Now, her boyfriend wants to get involved with mine? Just insane. I am so over it. My boyfriend is not the type to hold his tongue, but I have begged him to because I just want this to be over. Is the yearly budget a secret? Posted by OK What the Heck. I ran for the HOA board because the relatively new association was headed off the rails in a few different ways. If there was no one close to hold people accountable and to ask the tough questions to force answers into the light of day, I could see it devolving into one of those stereotypical boards run by one guy who thinks he knows everything and most definitely does not know the meaning of leading from behind or collaboration. It's definitely my least favorite work to do, but I'm going to try and hang in there until it feels like there's health in both process and among the board members. Wishful thinking on that last one, perhaps. Anyway, this means that I'm relatively new to this type of miniature governing body and typical HOA must-dos. But what I'm not new to is an unwavering commitment to information transparency and implementing processes that achieve that. So, being relatively new to this domain and my focus on information transparency give rise to my question. Last night, there was an open meeting where the primary agenda item was to approve the budget for next year. The draft budget had not been shared with the community prior to the meeting, nor was it included in the packet that they were emailed that contained the agenda. The board president ran through that agenda item so fast it made my head spin. I'm the secretary taking notes. The manager started with a bit of an update on why there were increases, was interrupted by the president with a word salad of hand-wavy stuff, very quickly followed with, "Any questions?" Silence, because I think people were trying to process what was said, and then the motion to accept the budget, and bam, it was done. In my naivety, I figured there would be a presentation of the actual numbers later in the meeting, or that a period of community review would be announced with a way to collect feedback. But nope, no such thing. That was it. Is this normal? This is people's money, and we have a right to examine and reflect, yes? Surely being in an HOA doesn't change that, does it? OP gives more info to this comment. The board is responsible for creating and approving the budget, not the owners, so while the owners are allowed to see the budget, they have no input into what is included in the budget. Draft budgets are usually only between board members and management, and it's your responsibility as a board member to review and vote on the proposed budget. An OP replies, absolutely agreed on who is responsible and has influence on the budget. That wasn't my question though. It had to do with visibility into the budget at the community level and when that was required to take place, if at all. What would you do if you were in the poster's shoes? And it happens in an HOA. I have a quick story about an entitled grandma at my old condo. My wife and I bought a condo about 10 years ago. It was a good starter place and it helped us buy our current house. We moved in while my wife was pregnant with our first kid, so naturally I had a lot of work to do when we first moved in. Before we even moved, painted about half the condo, cleaned the carpets, replaced the 2 sinks, and made some minor repairs. This was a strange condo because most buildings had 2-story units on top and single-story units on the bottom. Overall, this was a nice complex, and the HOA wasn't full of demon spawn. The HOA president was a nice woman who warned us that the insulation between the side units was pretty good, but non-existent between floors. We had a 2-story unit, and the entitled grandma Karen was on bottom. So at first, Karen was nice. She could hear me working on the condo and then came up to say hi and bring me some cake because she figured I was working hard. We had a nice talk and I told her about us having a baby and moving in. She told me that she had a grandson and how much we will like being parents. After the kid was born, she would wave to our daughter, exchange small talk, and so on. Normal neighbor stuff. Well, things changed that summer when we had a heat wave. My daughter was probably 3 months old at the time, and this condo was hot. For context, because of the layout, there were 2 windows upstairs, one in each bedroom, one in the dining room downstairs, and a sliding glass door to the deck. Of course, our daughter's room faced due west and was in full sunlight. We had great sun-blocking blinds, but we couldn't open her window until the sun went down and it was starting to get cooler outside. Otherwise, her room would be an oven. Even when we did this, it was 85+ degrees on a regular basis. Our HOA allowed portable AC units with hoses to the window, but not window AC units, which are ones hanging out of the window. I was able to petition them to get a window AC for our bedroom because it faced a green belt, so it wouldn't be seen. However, they expressly told me no window AC units for the front of the building. So this meant the only AC unit that we would get is a portable unit for the dining room. Those 2 units with some box fans made the heat tolerable. However, there was an unintended consequence of the portable unit that made the entitled Grandma Karen lose her mind. When I was at work one day, Karen came knocking on the door and my wife answered. She said that the AC units were making a lot of noise and keeping her grandson awake. He often stayed the night there. This was at the early evening and her grandson apparently couldn't sleep because of the noise. Bear in mind, this was a high-end, brand new AC unit. It wasn't loud and my wife showed it to her. She said it was over 90 degrees in our condo, so we had to keep it on for the baby. She was drinking her milk, but you could tell she was overheated. Our daughter started crying, so my wife excused herself and the Karen left. About an hour later, the Karen came back, this time pounding on the door and yelling for my wife to turn off the AC. My wife was dealing with our daughter and didn't want to answer the door with someone reacting like that. She pounded on the door for 10 minutes before giving up. She came back a little while later and again started pounding on the doors and shouting. My wife called me and I quickly came home to deal with this bullcrap. By the time I got home, it was finally cool enough to turn off the AC and open the windows. It was maybe 9 o'clock at night by this point. So I go straight over to Karen's unit and then I knock on the door. She opens it and gives me a dead stare that basically said, "What do you want?" I ask her, "Why are you pounding on my door and disturbing my wife and baby?" She said that the AC was loud and keeping her grandson up. So I say, "And this gives you a right to pound on my door and scream at my wife? I had to leave work to come and talk to you because you were so unhinged. I don't care what your problem is. Screaming at my wife is not how to deal with problems." I then explained how the AC unit didn't make any loud noises, and I'm not sure what she's hearing. The unit was off by this time, so I couldn't hear anything. I explained the extreme heat issue and how we were managing it, and I gave her my cell number to call me if she has issues in the future. She was to leave my wife alone and never pound on my door like that again. A few days later, we get a call from the HOA and the president went to check it out. She was trying to remain neutral and told me that I had a right to my AC, but that there was a noise, but it seemed like the walls were humming. With this, the only thing I could figure out was the building was crappy enough construction, that the AC was causing a weird vibration that caused the wood to become harmonic. Again, the AC unit made very little noise and had only a slight vibration from the motor. So I put my MacGyver hat on and I went to go to the hardware store. I get a foam kitchen mat, some cardboard, and packing tape. I fold over the mat, put several layers of cardboard in between, and I tape it shut. I basically made a poor man's vibration isolation pad. I put my AC unit on that, I took a picture, and I sent it to Karen and the HOA. I told them we would minimize the AC use, but we had a right to use it, and I have taken steps to mitigate the issue. For a while, this seemed to shut down Karen. However, she stopped saying hello and wouldn't look at me in the eye after that. Over the next few months, we had no real issues until we suddenly started hearing tapping sounds on the floor. I figured at first that she was hanging something, but no, she was hitting her ceiling with a broom. Apparently, the noise was unbearable. We were walking, no running, jumping, loud music, or dropping stuff, just walking. I went downstairs and talked to her about it, and I told her that we were just walking, and she complained about how loud it was. She even complained to the HOA again, but they figured out it was just the building being a little squeaky in places due to age. Literally nothing we could do about it unless we ripped up the floors. On Thanksgiving, when we had a couple of friends over, our kids were quietly playing in the living room, and we were sitting at the dining room table talking. I got up to get something from the kitchen when she started rapping on the ceiling again. I responded with a loud stomp on the floor, which made her stop. She's the one who decided to move into a bottom floor unit of an older building. We weren't loud people, and even when our daughter was a toddler, she was relatively quiet. Our unit was empty for most of the time she was there before we moved in, so I guess she got used to the quiet. After this, we barely acknowledged each other until we finally moved out a couple of years later. The woman who bought it from us was a single woman, so hopefully they get along better than we did. I mean, I'm a dad, and if you tell my young child you can't have the AC running when it's 90 degrees and they're clearly sweating and in trouble with the weather, no, I am not going to stand for that. As a parent, it is my job to take care of my kids because they're young and they need their dad to do that. So you know what? This Karen did not understand it, even having a grandson. So I don't know, I would stand up to her, definitely, and tell the HOA what she's doing again. What would you do? Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut? Okay, I'll take the firing. Posted by Nicolo2K. I worked for company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years. There were two main parts to the job. The first part was the sales side of things. This was away from the office in the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving and, on a couple occasions, flying abroad to work face-to-face with the customers to deliver a high-quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product. And I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I consistently got rave reviews from customers for my personal style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. The second part was the office side. This was my weaker side. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers that I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was fine, but I wasn't great at making the calls. This was my only real not great part of the job. So, in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared product, designed new product, trained new staff members, and ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees whenever I could. I liked the owner and I liked the manager. I liked all the staff who were around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and took pride in. The company had been doing so well that the owner had slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for company. I had joined about 3 months after he started, so I'd been part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I was loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. At one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary. Not massive, but I was happy. Then, the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was. He told me he would love for me to remain as his employee, but I would need to work from a different office. This would either require me to move or to quadruple, at a minimum, my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office, but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was just another employee, and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed that she was the new owner, everyone was very surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes. The manager left to start her own business, since the new owner was also going to be the manager. A lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anyone who had got to a decent level was let go. Since almost everyone was on a 0 hours contract, she was able to do this. While technically it was a new company for the customers, it was the same old business. The company still had the same trading name. The only real difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train up the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who'd been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience working with in the past. I was open and honest with the owner and let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, while my girlfriend could only work during the school holidays because she worked in a school. The owner gave them both interviews and then hired them, since we needed the staff. Over the next 2 years, business started to fall. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices while decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, this wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But for old customers who had been with us for 10 plus years, they immediately noticed. They were being charged more and were receiving less and worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased prices again. 95% of our old customers left us. New customers almost never became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. While all of this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized that the minimum wage they were being paid wasn't worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly wage for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit. My friend remained, but was looking for something new. Then, I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was unexpected. I had just finished working on location with a customer. My next customer was in 2.5 hours. It was a half-hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both locations. If I drove back to the office, I would have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare around the second location, so I intended to get there as early as possible to find parking and then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office, so I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple of days' time. I could bring a witness along if I desired. This knocked me for 6. I was the best employee. I read through her list of complaints about my performance and started working on my defense. At the meeting, I declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio of the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, this is legal and I didn't need consent. The boss's witness was her friend who she had met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who had been there long before the takeover. Every point she raised, I could counter. They ranged from the week, "You were unavailable to work for a week in August. I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday," to the pathetic, "You were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know?" "I don't know." "I do. Here's the receipt from the garage dated May 12th. To the downright lies. This one I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way I was delivering a product for a customer. I hadn't broken health and safety laws. I knew exactly what I was doing since, as I've mentioned already, I had been doing this for 14 years at this point. She had witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before, because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method, because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee at my current salary. I had 2 choices. I could either sign a 0-hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks' notice. I countered that she would have to give me 12 weeks' notice, since my contract guaranteed me 1 week's notice for every year of employment, up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I had only been her employee for 2 years, since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that with how the business takeover had run, it counts as continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up. She asked for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that, since she was firing me for gross misconduct, she didn't have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0-hours contract, I could do that today. But if I didn't then, she would have to fire me. But because she was nice, she would give me the 2 weeks notice. I asked for a couple of hours to go home and think about this. She allowed this. I knew the reason she wanted me to remain for at least 2 weeks was because one of our few remaining bigger customers were set to have a product delivery from me in that time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff in my place on several occasions, and each time there had been problems. It wasn't the staff's fault, it was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer which needed to be perfect. As a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of a 0-hours contract and said I would be leaving. She then said she was giving me my 2 weeks notice. I declined her offer of 2 weeks notice. I informed her that if I was being fired for gross misconduct, then surely I cannot be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it would be best for everyone involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and said that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what's best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering your product to your customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, then I would work my 12 weeks notice. They were her options, 0 weeks or 12. She chose 12. For those 12 weeks, I worked the same way I had for 14 years. I didn't coast. I didn't slack. I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to train new staff. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe her lies. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. Most petty of all, she paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day, except me. I was asked to work my day off to answer the phones while everyone else was being pampered. Nobody knew I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa and I wasn't there. Here's the thing, I'm a big fat bearded guy. I have no interest in a spa day. If she had offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the kind offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. For the last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over from me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came around. The owner had nothing planned, not so much as a card after 14 years, 2 for her. The office assistant manager who had become a friend had got me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend who I had been training up to replace me quit. He was on a 0 hours contract, so it required no notice. He was unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my, previously salaried, job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned of it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work to let me know. The second was the owner received a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for unfair dismissal. I had arranged this with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims for unfair dismissal, said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with some more reasons for firing me. But the truth was that the company was making less money because of her business practices, and I was the highest and only salary. I had evidence that I was a great employee. I had evidence that she asked me to move to a 0 hours contract. She initially tried to deny this, since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay. But once my lawyer provided hers with a transcript of the entire meeting, along with a copy of the recording, she knew she was effed. Still, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped that the legal fees would lead me to dropping the case. Little did she know, my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis, while hers wasn't. She ended up settling out of court. The aftermath. The office assistant who had become a friend quit a couple months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently, the owner was telling them that I had just quit. I informed them that I had been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went so far as to offer me a part-time job and to pay for me to attend college to earn a degree required for them to hire me full-time. This was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who were a bit too far away to commute, and I wasn't ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over, currently earning more than I was, working less hours, and for better owners. The business is floundering. The pandemic left the new owner desperate for cash. She canceled orders but refused to refund the customer's money, citing an act of God clause in the contracts. The business's Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most staff left. The business is still afloat, but barely. OP's parents are giving them an ultimatum: pay for our house or else. This could go bad fast. Let me know what you'd do. Hi everyone. My parents, 66 mom, 65 dad, are looking to retire and are about to sell their house. They'll most likely get around $500,000 from the sale, which they'll put towards the new house. We all used to live with them, my family and my sisters, but we've all moved out, so they can't afford the current mortgage payment. According to their calculations, the new mortgage would be $100,000, and the monthly payment would be $1,000, not including property taxes, utilities, and HOA. Last night, they gave us 3 options. They do a reverse mortgage, and we don't get anything from their inheritance. They move out of state. I don't consider this an option at all. Or we pay split the mortgage payment, $500 each. Apparently, based on what they'll be getting from Social Security and their 401k, they won't have much to live off of after paying the mortgage payment. My dad's full Social Security retirement is age 67, and if he works for another 2 years, he'll get another $700 to $800 a month. But he obviously doesn't seem keen on the idea, especially since the location they're looking to move to will turn his 10-minute commute into a 30-minute to 1-hour one. They've told us to think of this as an investment and that the property value will go up over time, which I'm sure it will since we're in California. It just seems like a long commitment, like over 15 years, and I eventually want to buy my own home. I'm 29, about to turn 30. I'm married and have 2 kids. I make a good income, $210,000, not including bonuses, so we can afford the $500 a month. The other worry I have is on my sister's side, as their situation isn't really as stable as ours, and I could end up having to pay the full $1,000 myself. I'm leaning towards helping them out, helping myself out as well. They've done so much for me, and I feel obligated. I'm just curious if there's any other options they have. There's $500,000 equity in their current house, and I feel like paying the mortgage is the best thing to do for myself and them as well, but I just want to make sure I'm making the right decision. Do you agree with this comment? What happens if down the road they need a nursing home or long-term care, and they need to sell the house you've been paying for to fund it? You should probably talk with a lawyer who handles estate planning. Does this feel like that they're just being taken advantage of? Like, hey, we're going to pull your inheritance, or you have to pay for this, or we're just going to leave. And I just don't know. There's so many things that they need to lawyer up and just get this thing handled carefully. It could go wrong fast. What do you think? Pro-divorce, posted by a deleted account. Throwaway, as this might not make me very popular, even in pro-revenge. This all happened to me a few years ago. I told a friend the story of my divorce, and I was told to share. This all started a few years ago. I thought we were happy. We were your usual suburban professional couple. Financially secure, healthy, good marital life, 2 kids, 14 female, 9 male at the time. I thought we had a healthy social life. We were going through one of your typical married couple rough patches. Both of us were working long hours, not spending enough time together, and we were going through some developmental problems with my son, and tensions in the house were running a little high. I noticed that she was spending a lot more time on her phone, texting with her girlfriends. I didn't think much of it. I started making a much more concerted effort to get out of work when I could, help around the house, and be more emotionally available. But over the course of a few weeks, the gulf just kept getting wider. I ended up accidentally finding some messages when I charged up an old iPad for my son to use. Her Facebook Messenger was still logged in, and there were a lot of highly questionable messages with a guy from her hometown, who I will call Jim Bob Cooter, or JBC for short. The messages weren't completely inappropriate, but I could tell there were quite a few missing based on the times and context of the messages. I made a mental note to keep an eye on this and went about trying to fix things up. The next day after, I took the day off to knock out some projects that I thought would make her happy and left her some sweet notes reminding her how much I appreciated her, and she was once again in the corner of the living room texting her girlfriends. I took the boy's iPad to the office, opened up Facebook Messenger, and watched in real time as my wife tore me down. Her and JBC were making fun of me. All of my flaws and insecurities and secrets that I entrusted to my partner were now fodder on her and JBC. Not only that, but while there weren't outright inappropriate messages, there was an undertone to the whole conversation, especially when she was bashing my performance. I managed to take some screenshots, but missed a good bit of the messages because as the conversation was unfolding, she was deleting them. I wasn't emotionally capable of confronting her. I stayed in the office until she was asleep and had a couple drinks. I took off the next day and spent some time soul-searching, drinking, and trying to figure out what to do. The wife came home and wanted to know what was wrong, and I just copped out and I told her that I had a bad day. A couple minutes later, I was watching the iPad as the train wreck kept unfolding. So, began a couple solid weeks of taking screenshots, drinking, and detaching myself from the relationship. I knew there was no going back from this. The messages were now overtly dirty, with my wife completely into it, and JBC was sprinkling in "I love yous." I consulted a lawyer and got my options, and started moving forward. Here's where everything got absolutely surreal. Watching the messages, I found out JBC was coming to town to spend a weekend of quality time with my wife in a pretty nice hotel. I was missing a good bit of the info. They must have had a phone conversation about it at some point, but I was able to infer enough to get the when and the where. Sure as heck, the next day, the wife is buttering me up and wanting to take a spa weekend with the girls to relax, and when she gets back, we can really focus on our marriage. I go with it all the way. It's the greatest idea she's ever had, and I'll do anything to get us back on track. I get with the lawyer and have him draft a strong separation agreement stating that she would move out. She would get weekend visitation, no child support in the interim until the divorce is final. Then I sat through the most agonizing 2 weeks of my life. After all this, most of my feelings for her are completely gone, and I'm just seething with anger like I've never felt before. D-Day arrives. I take the day off work. I withdraw half of any money in my accounts that were joint on, leave her half alone. I had already redirected my paycheck to a new bank. I close our money market account and get a cashier's check for her half and deposit my half in my new account. I stop at Office Max and print out about 75 pages of Facebook Messenger screenshots, and I kill time because I don't want to be at home. She texts me that she's taking off and that she loves me. I tell her to have fun. I show up at the hotel at about 8:30 and call the wife's phone from the lobby. It goes straight to voicemail. They're probably already at it. Whatever. I walk up to the front desk and ask if I can use the phone to be connected to JBC's room. It rings 3 times, and he picks up. Hello? JBC, can you send my wife down to the lobby, please? I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Okay, then. I guess I'll have to call Mrs. JBC and get her down here. Totally a bluff. I mean, I knew he was married, and I knew her first name, but that was it. JBC is inaudible. He's shuffling. He's in panic. You got 5 minutes. Click. Not even 2 minutes later, my wife comes walking out of the elevator, looking a little flustered. I sit her down in the corner of the lobby. She starts spewing some BS saying that it's not what it seems and blah, 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 blah. I say, look, I'm not here to argue. The things that are said in this pile of papers are what's going on. The only way I'm not giving a copy of this to daughter, your parents, and emailing it to everyone we know is if you move out immediately. My wife was very prideful. The daughter was going through a rebellious teen phase, and her knowing would probably have forever killed their relationship. Wife was also her parents' golden child, and she always worried about what they thought of her. I didn't have much leverage, and shame was my only card to play. Also, her professional life is built up around her image, so I knew she would protect that at all costs. She's sniffling and mumbling, just inaudible. I say, this is a check for half of the money market account. I've withdrawn my half of the money from all the other joint accounts. You should have more than enough to get a place. She starts to cry a little. I could almost see the different thoughts and waves of emotions going through her, but now was the time to keep pressing. Here's a separation agreement that I think is more than fair considering what's going on. I'm going to need you to look this over, sign it, and leave it at the house when you get your stuff. Do you want to look through these screenshots? No, she says. Okay, go have fun with JBC. Don't come back to the house or I'm going to send this, holding up a ream of screenshots, to everyone. I bounce out of the lobby and I can hear her start to have a breakdown. I get to the car and drive off to a parking lot and have my own crying rage fit. Previously, I would have cried in front of her and yelled and whatnot, but I managed to get my crap together enough to pull it off. I don't know what she did that night or over the weekend. She texted and called over and over wanting to talk. I just turned the phone off, and by the time Monday afternoon rolled around, there were movers getting her stuff and she delivered the agreement. I let her have a talk with the kiddos, basically saying, Mommy and Daddy need some time apart and we still love you, and so on and so on. Standard divorce talk. After a week, she wants to have a real talk for the first time. I oblige her because I've already got my crap together and I've got an idea of what I want, but I should hear her out. She's so sorry. She wants another chance. She wants her family back. She'll do anything. She's on her knees crying into my lap. I have no intention of ever taking her back. I tell her that she needs to set up marriage counseling on her own at a time that works for me. I tell her that I can't live with her, but she should be around the children to try and maintain a relationship with them. So starts our new normal of her coming over to the house, cooking, and having dinner with the kids 3 nights a week. She always saved me a plate, and I made myself scarce. Her cleaning the house and doing the kids' laundry, and then heading back to her place. We went to counseling. It consisted of her working through the issues with the therapist, trying to figure out why she did it, her begging for forgiveness, and me stoically playing the victim. I was never going to give her another chance. All I wanted to do was kill time, establish myself as a primary caregiver to the kids, and establish her as not having residency in the house. After a few months, I go to my own therapist and get diagnosed with depression and PTSD. I ask my work if it's possible to go part-time for the foreseeable future to deal with personal issues, and it's no big deal. After 6 months of therapy, I told her that I couldn't forgive her right now and that I wanted an amicable divorce, but she is still the love of my life and maybe someday we could give it another try. She was devastated, but agreed to the divorce if I promised to try again someday. Once the divorce was filed, I needed the kids to want to stay with me. I left a Google search for "How to Survive Your Wife's Infidelity" up on the shared PC at home, and I left some printed out infidelity articles not so hidden in the kitchen. My daughter found them and came to me crying. I told her that she wasn't supposed to find those, that mom made a mistake, that her mom still loves her, and that I would always be there for her. My daughter, who used to hold my wife in such high regard, now wouldn't talk to her without screaming, and it crushed her. Not surprisingly, when the court needed statements from the kids a few months later, little brother followed big sister's lead, and they both wanted to stay with dad in the house that they grew up in. When the divorce was finalized, I got to the house. I had to buy out some of her equity, but that's okay. I got primary custody of the kids. I got awarded generous child support due to the difference in our incomes due to me working part-time. Now, for the last 2 years, I've got to live in the house with my kids, work part-time, get the now ex to subsidize it for me, and when she takes the kids over the weekends, I get to have my fun with the Tinderellas and some FWBs that I've cultivated. In the eyes of my kids, I'm the patron saint of fatherhood for taking the high road and always being there. In the eyes of my ex, I'm the one that got away that she will always pine for, and I get the bonus of having her come over for stuff whenever I want it by dangling that carrot of maybe getting back together. But that is never going to happen. You only want me working part-time in case there isn't too much work next year? Sure, posted by Fletcher Marcan. I must confess that I have a profound respect for people who do not take crap from their employers. You are my heroes, and so I hope my story can help someone else. Okay, so first, some necessary background info. I live in a small country and I'm an engineer in a very niche field. Where I live, there are about 15 to 18 people in my field in the whole country. Also, unions are a good thing here, and most companies are fine with unions. The employee benefits from this, but so does the employer, since the rules of the game are very clear. Clear for most people, as my employer was about to find out. My story goes like this, and it took place late 2019 until late 2020. My team consisted of 3 people, me included, and one on our team, our mentor, was ready to retire 2 years prior to this happening, but he stayed on because, well, codependence issues, I guess. We had 10 to 12 years experience each. We were just younger and more inexperienced than our mentor, who has 40 plus years experience. I really envisioned us taking over the team soonish. Company is a large actor where I live, but things had not been going too great for the shareholders for some 6 months prior to all this happening. Knowing this, I decide I'll not ask for a raise in my annual performance review to show that I am a team player, and I explicitly state this to my boss's boss, Mr. V. All is fine and well for 3 months. Then, the bomb drops. One fine autumn day in 2019, I was called to a meeting with my boss, Mrs. G. Mrs. G told me that they didn't expect there to be enough work to go around for my team next year. The pandemic had not struck yet, so that was not the reason. So, they wanted to cut me down to a part-time job, working only 80%, which that would be about 4 days a week, starting 3 months hence. I immediately asked if this is also the case for my other coworker and if our mentor was going to retire. Well, yes, but no. My coworker would also be offered 80%. Our mentor was going to be working 60%. And I'm like, what? He really wants to retire, Well, he is not yet, says Mrs. G, because of reasons and stuff. Okay, so I signed the new contract, but I feel bad about it, since I was really trying to be a team player and did not feel my employer was taking responsibility for us employees, but only thinking of the shareholders. I also get the feeling that they do not see me or my coworker taking over the team anytime soon, despite us not being novices in the field. I immediately start planning for the future. After this happens, I start asking around if other employees are also facing part-time employment due to no projects in 2020. As one does, you want to know how others are doing, right? Nobody else is getting part-timed. And everybody else is appalled. Just us three. We are singled out for some reason. Some of our colleagues even say that they have had stints of no work for months without any actions taken in this regard. There is now general displeasure in my team towards our employer. Since our mentor just wanted to retire and let us do the job, there would have not been any reason to have us younger engineers working part-time, really. But no, because of reasons and stuff. Okay, so what to do? I have a family and 2 kids and mortgages in the lot, and this will be a blow to the family income. So I start planning to do some work on the side. Since I'm an engineer, I can do consulting, right? My employment contract says no. But if my employer cannot or will not offer me a full-time job, the union contracts say I can do what I want with the rest of my time, and my employer cannot interfere. I also have the right to refuse more work from my employer because I may have other obligations. Me, 1. Employer, 0. I open up my own company, buy a domain, make a web page, start calling and writing and letting people know that I'm available for consulting. Of course, I checked with the union lawyers beforehand if this was okay, which it was. Totally fine. They told me that since my employer laid me off and rehired me part-time, I could do what I wanted with the rest of my time. This would not have been the case if I had requested part-time employment. Great. I go to work for myself then. Me too. 0 employer. Almost immediately after our new contracts take effect, my employer starts noticing there is more than enough work to go around and asks me to work more hours. No, I say. Unfortunately, I have other obligations. I really didn't. I was just making a stand and forcing them to recognize their own mistake. Time passes. My savings account drains in about 3 months' time, but we managed to cut down on our expenses, so it's not rough seas, but still not smooth sailing by far. Income is a bit on the low side, although I managed to get some consulting done in my own time. I switched from sourdough bread to stale, boring white bread. Go from good beer to Bud Light to no beer. What you have to do, you have to do. No more fine roasted coffee from the small shop on the corner. Only what sludge I can get at the supermarket and brew at home. Ugh. But this is temporary, I tell myself. And then it happens. I get a big job and start moonlighting to get it done, working evenings and weekends. And this is when the crap hit the fan because word got out. I get an angry phone call from Mrs. G's boss, Mr. V, and we have a heated conversation over what I can and cannot do. The conversation was something like this in short terms. Mr. V says, "Think of how this reflects on our company." I say, "Well, that's not my concern here, Mr. V. I have bills to pay and mouths to feed." "This is not what we had in mind." "Hey, you laid me off, man. You should know the rules of the game. You cannot dictate what I do in my spare time. Perhaps you should have thought it through when you reduced my hours. You think I was happy to lose income and would not try to remedy my financial situation? You can work more hours for us then." "Hey, I have other obligations now. I can't let down my customers." Angrily, Mr. V says, "You should consider your next steps carefully, young man." "Mr. V, I shall do that. Thank you for calling, you pompous prick," I silently added. What then followed was a phone call from me to my union explaining the situation. Later that week, my employer got a phone call from the union lawyers who spoke to Mr. V in HR department, telling them what they can and cannot do. And I just kept working for myself. Mr. V is now very unhappy and stops greeting me when we pass each other in the hallway. Me, 3, 0 employer. 2 months later, I hand in my resignation. 3 months after that, I'm gone. And to rub salt in the wounds, something remarkable happens. My coworker, not our mentor mind you, asked if I would want to partner up and start a new company together. Yes, I say, for it was a great idea. Coworker hands in resignation a month after I handed mine in, and we start working in our own company full time. People that depend on our services are very happy about us entering the market as independent consultants. Business takes off. Me/us 4. 0 employer. The aftermath. My former employer has had an opening for our jobs since August 2020. Our mentor told me last month that he has, finally, put down his foot and is retiring at the end of the year as he's turning 70 soon. They will thus have gone from 3 people in a very niche field to 0 in less than 2 years because of bad managerial decisions. It did not come as a surprise to me that there were no others available in the market. Since it's a niche field, I know almost every person personally, so I could have told them that everybody seemed happy with their current employer. Being a manager must suck. Oh wait, that's me now. A trip around the world in 80 minutes, posted by Joe Sayotom. This story comes from when I worked in an inbound call center. I handled escalation calls. When someone called in regarding their service plan with complaints that cannot be handled with a regular agent's authority, or the caller demanded to speak with a supervisor or manager, the call got transferred into my team's call queue and one of us handled it. A little background. I was born and raised in the Southwest. When I was a wee little child, I spoke with a very heavy stutter. It took several years and lots of patience on my mother's part to teach me how to speak normally. The outcome was that I had to enunciate all my words carefully and thus spoke without any hint of a local accent. Later, during my middle school days, I got teased a lot for not having a proper accent. So I decided to teach myself how to speak with the proper accent. I watched a lot of my dad's old black and white westerns to learn the lingo. Then I started talking like Scotty from the original Star Trek series. It was fun, so I started copying other accents from TV and movies. I had over a dozen, including German Sergeant Schultz, I Know Nothing, pirate and badly dubbed Chinese Kung Fu, with lots of pauses, simple phrases, and every sentence ends in ha. One bad side effect came about though. Often, when I'm around a person with a heavy accent, I subconsciously begin to mimic their accent. I don't realize I'm doing it until it's pointed out, and usually the other person thinks I'm making fun of them or something. To avoid getting punched in the face, I have to do some quick explaining without the borrowed accent. So, the call. A call comes into my queue and I answer it as normal. Kind of. I had been joking around with my supervisor while using an Indian accent, so when I answered the call, I was still using the accent. The woman caller was immediately furious. She started screaming at the top of her lungs that she had specifically demanded to speak with someone who spoke English, not a... Well, let's just say her choice of words lay heavy on the racial side, and leave it at that. Realizing my error, I dropped the accent and tried to talk with the lady normally, but she would have none of it. She continued on a horrible racial diatribe about foreign call center workers, how there wasn't any proper American English speakers anymore, and cussing me up one side and down the other. Now, I've handled a lot of angry calls by small-minded people, but there is one hot button I will not tolerate. The caller started insulting my parents. You wish to talk to someone who speaks English, correct? I broke in, dropping back into the Indian accent at the same time. Yes. Not a problem, I said. I'll transfer you to someone who speaks English. But I must warn you, do not disconnect from the call for any reason whatsoever. We are experiencing a rather large call volume at this time. You are currently at the top of the queue. But if you disconnect and call back, you will be all the way back at the bottom of the call line. And you do not want that, correct? Gosh, no! Very well, please stay on the line and the next available English speaker will be with you shortly. Have a most pleasant day. And then I put her on hold. It should be noted that we were not supposed to put callers on hold, but I did so that she would, 1, think she was being transferred, and 2, make her listen to the horrible hold music. Placing a caller on hold immediately sent up a red flag in the call monitoring software. Normally, a supervisor would come storming over and demand answers. My supervisor, however, had his cubicle right next to mine and had been leaning over the top when I had initially fumbled the call. He had also patched his phone into my line and heard everything the caller had said. "What are you doing?" he asked, while smiling a wicked smile. Exactly what she demanded. She wants to talk with someone who speaks English, then that's exactly what she's going to get. I replied with my own crap-eating grin. After 5 minutes, I took the call off hold and answered with my best Russian accent in place. Then on hold again. 5 minutes later, German accent, and then French, then Swedish, then Mario Brothers Italian, and so on and so forth. For an hour, I kept transferring this racial witch, each time answering the phone with both good, bad, and horrible accents speaking English. I thought for sure she would have caught on around the 30-minute mark when I spoke pirate. She didn't, so I continued. After about 1 hour and 20 minutes of sending this woman on a verbal tour of the world, the woman was sobbing so hard I could barely make out her distressed words. So I went in for the kill. I answered the phone with a thick southern drawl. She was so happy. She spent a good 10 minutes telling me what a horrible experience she has had just to finally talk with someone who spoke proper English. I asked her what I could do for her, and she told me what her issue was. It was something so simple that one of the regular agents could have handled it in less than 2 minutes. Finishing up the call, the woman once thanked me for speaking proper English. I dropped back into the Indian accent. "Not a problem at all, madam. It was a pleasure to handle your call. You know, it's funny. You sound just like a woman I spoke to an hour ago. Isn't life strange?" With a satisfied smile, I hung up during the scream of choking rage. Unjustly fire me? Let me make you go bankrupt real quick. Posted by In The Hague. I was told to post this here, so here we go. This happened a few years ago, and it still makes me giggle with glee to this day. I'm a 34-year-old female who has always been a bit of a tomboy. I like cars and sports and reptiles. When I was 25, I wanted a career change and finally follow my dream of working in an auto repair shop as a painter, like my father always did. To start my education, I needed to already have a job at an auto repair shop as an intern. So I searched and called a lot of companies to see if they had spots. There were literally several companies that laughed at me because there's no place for a woman on the work floor. Disheartened, I tried one final company who said he'd take a chance with me. I was thrilled. I was promised lots of opportunities to learn and a steady job after graduation. I started a week later, and the first 2 weeks were awesome. I learned a lot and was promised even more opportunities. He promised I would have 2 to 3 hours a week of private time with the resident painter for practice. Soon after, though, it went downhill. The owner had bid on a contract with a large city in our country to restore underground containers. I had to sand them down, put sealant on the edges, and prepare them for painting. Tedious work, but I did it diligently. The promised practice time never happened. After a while, all I did, day in and day out, 8 hours a day, was sand down underground containers. By the end of the day, my hands and wrists were numb from the vibrations. This, by the way, is illegal. You're not allowed to sand with a pneumatic sanding machine for more than 4 hours a day in my country, as it causes severe wrist and hand issues. After several months, the contract with the city ended, and I hoped my promised practice time would come. But no, it didn't. I was given jobs that had nothing to do with my education. I was told to do jobs that a contractor should do, like put rebar in front of the windows, repair the sliding doors, repair walls, and other small things. Basically nothing to do with my desire to become a painter. After 6 months of doing literally nothing that I could count to my education, my boss called me into his office. He told me he was fed up with my attitude, that he made a mistake hiring me. I was fired on the spot. I was heartbroken and cried the whole way home. I didn't get it. I put 110% into my job, working hard, always on time, staying late if needed, and never complained. I didn't understand what happened and was pretty down for a while. However, several days later, I found out I was pregnant, which helped me to get over my downness. We'd been trying over a year, and we were ecstatic. When the time came that my final paycheck should come in, nothing happened. A week after it normally came in, I called, but was told to not complain and it would be transferred shortly. 2 weeks later, still nothing. I called again and got a very irate boss on the line, cussing at me and calling me things I will not repeat here. I was fed up and contacted my lawyer. Here comes the revenge part. In my country, there's apparently a few laws that my boss broke without me even knowing about them. First, you're not allowed to fire somebody without reasonable cause. You need to document bad behavior and give the employee a write-up. After 2 write-ups, you're allowed to terminate. My boss never did this. Unlawful termination can end in a fine, and the employee has a right to get as many monthly pays as their employment contract would have continued if the employee wasn't terminated, which would mean I had a right to another 6 months of pay. Second, you must pay the final paycheck within a week of termination. We were now going on week 4. After the first week, an employee is entitled to compensation of up to 100 euros per day of not receiving their paycheck, meaning I was now entitled to at least 2,100 euros extra pay. My lawyer wrote up a letter to my boss stating we would be pursuing my legal rights. He didn't respond. A week later, we sent another letter increasing the compensation for late payment as we went. After a month of my lawyer not getting any response, suddenly, I received my pay. No compensation, nothing, just basic pay. My lawyer recommended to go to small claims court, and so we did. Mind you, it takes about 3 months before you can appear before court. He didn't even show up in court, but he sent a statement through his lawyer saying how I was a horrible employee and blah, 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 blah. However, he had no proof whatsoever, but I did. I had my performance reports from 1 month into employment and 4 months into employment, and they were stellar. The judge saw right through my boss's BS and awarded me 6 months of pay, or 12,000 euros. 4 months of late payment compensation, and this is because he didn't pay the full amount my lawyer requested, as was my legal right, about 12,000 euros. Legal fees, now about 3,000 euros, and I was paid the same week. He was then also charged with a fine for violating employment laws. He had to pay 50,000. This resulted in the Employment Bureau, which this agency makes sure that companies comply with employment laws and so on, investigating the company. They discovered the building I worked at was unsafe. The foundation was unstable, walls were crumbling and tilting, and he was told to make repairs or they would close him down within a month. By accident, they discovered he was also cheating on his taxes, so the tax agency got involved. He got charged with embezzlement and tax evasion for both of his companies. He had to pay back all taxes he evaded, plus a 100% fine, coming to a staggering 250,000 over several years. He didn't have that kind of money, and after struggling for about 2 months, which resulted in him not paying his other employees, he went belly up. Both businesses shut down, and the building that I worked at even got demolished. 7 years later, it's still an empty plot, and if I ever feel put down by somebody, I take a short drive to that place. And it reminds me, people will sometimes get what they deserve. Man gets car crushed by not paying his repair bill. Posted by I signed up because of r/. Not my story, but my father's. It took place in the early 2000s. He's a master mechanic who can literally work on any car, foreign or domestic. He's teaching me right now, and it's an honor to learn from him. He's always run his own independent repair shop almost as long as I can remember, and he told me this story recently that just seems perfect for this sub. So this guy comes in with a pretty nice Chrysler convertible to get his transmission fixed. He had to remove the transmission, disassemble, and rebuild it. Pretty long process, but it's no problem. After a day's work, he calls the customer up, says his car is ready, and reminds him of the agreed upon price of about $1,200. The guy said he could only pay $600 then, and he'd have to get back to him on the rest. Now, this isn't out of the ordinary. Where we live, most people aren't exactly wealthy, and my dad's a nice guy. He single-handedly supported 4 kids and a wife, so we weren't exactly rich. It's not uncommon for people to pay in installments. He doesn't charge interest or fees or anything, just tries to do what's right. The guy pays half the bill, and with the promise of paying the remaining amount in a few weeks, he leaves with his car. About 2 months pass, however, and the guy hasn't paid. hadn't even contacted my dad about any issues or to say something like he lost his job or something. So my dad calls him up and asks when he thinks he'll be able to pay the rest of the bill. And I kid you not, this is how the convo went. Dad says, "Hey, this is Austin. I was wondering when you'll be able to pay the rest of your bill." Guy says, "Oh, yeah, about that. I'm not paying it." Dad, surprised, says, "What? Is there something wrong with the car? If something went wrong, I'll take care of it." No, the car runs great. I'm just not gonna pay you." "What? Why?" "Well, I have the car now, so I don't see any reason to pay you." They went back and forth a bit before my dad realized it was pointless and decided to enact some sweet, sweet revenge. He calls up a local towing company and gives them the guy's address, license plate, and car description and tells them to tow the vehicle to the county recycling center. He then calls up the recycling center and says, "Hey, you're going to be getting a Chrysler convertible license plate X from my towing shop. When it gets there, I want you guys to crush it and recycle it." And so they do. The car was crushed and recycled. The next day, the guy shows up to my dad's business, furious, and with the state patrol. My dad explains the entire story, and the cops tell the guy that, technically, the vehicle was moved, not stolen. The recycling center received recyclable goods and not stolen property. And now, the car no longer exists, as it's been recycled, and thus was not a criminal matter, but a civil one. So, the guy sues my dad, and once again, my dad explains the entire story, and amazingly, the judge says the same thing as the troopers, and dismissed. It sounds almost unbelievable, because it just seems so illegal, but if a judge rules in his favor, it's gotta have some merit by a technicality or something. Granted, this was maybe 15 years ago, so the laws could have changed since. But dang, the guy gets his car crushed simply because he chose not to pay the remaining repair bill and wanted to take advantage of someone else's kindness.